Well, good morning. Keith Hayes, Mirador Television, break an egg, and it's 7:30 on Tuesday morning, and I think it's the 22nd. What the heck? What the heck? At least it is something of a liberation day. Paul Fowle is standing by in the wings to join me this morning for more good, sensible comment, as opposed to my rather rambling suggestions about anything and everything. So join us in. Lewis, the wonderful and lovely town in which we are located, and I actually live. But we really are not parochial. We are local, but not parochial, and we talk about all sorts of things. And I suppose, really, if I could have found them in time, I should have had church bells ringing because it looks as if we can see an end to lockdown. First, the weather here and along the coast is it is going to be well, it's around about 7 at the moment. As I walked to the studio this morning, it was nice and fresh, and I actually thought, well, there is a feel of spring in the air. Although I think it is the 21st, either the 20th or the 21st of March, the spring officially starts. But there was just that little touch of freshness, and perhaps it's because we're looking at the end of a very bad era in English history, because we've had 2 years in which, well, we've had a year and a half anyway, in which life has been absolute hell, to say the least. And some of us will come through it and some of us won't. And the sad thing is that some of us won't. So let's be sort of cautious about ringing the bells. But anyway, it's going to be cloudy, and towards late morning, we're going to get a burst of sunshine, which is going to last until almost to tea time. That's what the experts say. And if they say so, why not believe them? It's windy, though. It's a bit gusty. It's about 14 knots, so be careful. I don't. I have to hold on to this hat when I go out when it's like that. So if you've got a titfer that you really want to wear that is not blowable, offable, then that's the way to do it. At the time in between the burst of sun, it will be cloudy, so watch it a bit. Okay, now you can't find much in the news this morning, except for COVID, lockdown, and so on. And I'm going to bring in Paul Fowle in a minute to have a chat about that. But since it is virtually the only headline, at least nationally, I suppose that we should say that there are 4 stages, and that by June we should be totally free of any restrictions. But will we go back to life as we knew it? That's difficult. One of the things that is already showing a reflection of the fact that we're going to get a little bit more liberal approach to things is that bookings for holidays have started to shoot up. The travel agents are doing quite well now. And hopefully people won't lose their money. The airports will be back into full swing. No, they won't be back into full swing. Anybody who thinks that we're going back to just the way it was when we all had to lock down got another thing coming. This particular television station is going to have to take at least 5 or 6 days of hard thinking between Paul and myself to lay out our strategy for post-lockdown, starting in next week and next month. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy at all. I'm sitting here in a studio that is empty. Yes, the equipment is here, but no people. And to get people back and start doing things the way that you did, or to revise, takes a little bit of time and effort, and we're going to have to put that in. But so is everybody else. So don't expect absolutely everything to go back to the way it was. And in June the 12th, well, at least with the stages, some people will have a fighting chance. But I think to avoid disappointment, I'm a half full glass man, always the optimist. Things will always happen to the very best. And most times I'm not disappointed. But I am bracing myself with this to see it not come off the rails if we take it in a steady way forward. And one of the things that is a bit worrying is that in the States, they've hit 500,000 deaths. And Joe Biden is saying, how dreadful that is. And that's easy for a president who's well protected to say that. But it is a lot. And there are increases around the country and around the world. It is not defeated yet. So I think when we take the brakes off, we've just got to be a wee bit careful about the way that we go. There was something locally that I thought was interesting, but I've lost it, as I often do. We have to take things a bit at a time here, because actually what we've managed to do is to get through a month with just a couple of us. Not easy. And how we'll proceed from here, I'm not 100% sure. But yesterday was a prime example of where it is difficult to run. Yes, it's possible, but it's difficult to run this sort of operation alone, because we had all sorts of cock-ups, including one of our followers saying, "Hey, I've just tapped into YouTube and it's blank." And it was because we had a false start. And I'm not quite sure how to delete those false starts. So that sort of thing. And throughout the day, we had great difficulty assessing or accessing all sorts of things. So that's the way it stands for the country, for Mirador, for all sorts of other people. And it's now 7:38. So let's just play a little something quickly, and we'll bring in Paul Fowl and get some common sense into this program. Common sense, Paul. Common sense.
When you've missed the train, don't despair. Have a nice cup of coffee. And perhaps a mince pie. At the runaway on Lewis Station. After that, why worry about the next train? The runaway on Lewis Station. Relaxation beyond compare.
Well, there we are. So let's say good morning to Paul Fowle. How are you, Paul?
Hi, Keith. Am I up? That's it. Good man. Yeah. Excellent. Good
How
morning.
are
Good
you
morning.
this morning?
Tired, Keith.
What, you have celebrating all night?
I know reading all about COVID. I take it to bed with me. In the morning I read it. Yeah, there is a lot of overkill on this.
Yes, there is. But
Yeah.
I suppose, should the church bells start ringing, are we really seeing an end of it in June?
Okay. First of all, I'm going to call this. There's three scenarios in everything. There's the nanny state overkill. We know what we're doing. Side on one side. There's in the middle grounder who says, well, yeah, some of the experts are right, but there's other things to consider. And the far thing is that we accept nature, fate, etc. The worry I've got is experts. If there's a great, I think it was a great philosopher said, if you took me, a common man, with an expert, if we go into the same jungle, the expert's got the map. I haven't got the map, but I've got as much chance of finding the right part of the jungle than the expert. The reason I'm saying all this, Keith, is I think there has been overkill. I've also got an example where if you look at I noticed as Patrick, the government's guy has said, easing the lockdown in stages. Flying blind, etc. The worry I've got is if it's being dragged out too much, Keith. In my view, I've just got this innate feeling it's being dragged out. When we've had previous massive viruses, epidemics, there's been obviously you want to mitigate death, but at the end of the day, coronavirus is going to be with us. It won't be expunged. It'll just be in the great sky above. But I'm just concerned about this dragging on because they're saying probably to the end of the year. I'm not sure some people can take that much of it. What heartens me is that hospitality is being opened and eased. That's got to happen because otherwise we're not being civilized people, are we? You've got to have a drink, etc.
Yeah.
So, the thing
I've
got
100% there.
I use the worry I've got is in life. There's the part where you can plan a day and it goes your way, and there's a part which is fate, i.e., go to a car. What I think the government's trying to do is use a car analogy. Is you must be chaperoned to the car, you must be chaperoned to drive it. You must be chaperoned to where you arrive, and that's your day. I think it's overkill to some extent. There's a nanny state element, but I have every admiration for experts. I'll go along with them, but there's something that tells me other epidemics haven't been dragged out. You're saying, oh, it's a new and terrible one. There's been far worse epidemics. Where you've had to think on your feet. So I think everyone's done a good job, but I'm just uneasy about the length of time this has taken, Keith. And we're saying, I think it could well be, if Boris says it's end of the year, or June, July, something's going to happen, end of the year. It probably will be next year. And I think that's, for looking at the harsh statistics, it's not a major killer over the last 100 years. It's a major killer, yes, and everyone accepts that. 2.5 million, say. But it's not as bad as other ones. So I'm just worried that that all this wonderful science we have, I'm sure is good, but it's not always precise. And I don't like the nanny state element, which is small at the moment. But everyone I speak to has always raised that. So I'm just being a bit contentious. Everyone has done a great job, the government. But the thing is, we're all in the same boat. We know as much. You could say when it broke out, Keith, I knew as much about COVID as Boris did. So you see what my argument is. The nanny state on one side, fate, nature, human course, natural, which is what we have to put up with, and the middle ground is where you have an element of both. And nanny state, I'm not for, Keith. I'm not, and I think it's been dragged on. I think a bit too long, in my view. If it goes to end of the year. How's that? A bit for contention.
Well, I mean, it's. You've always made a very interesting assessment, Paul. I know that we have a lot of fun on this program and we josh a lot, but we do have serious intent. And one of the things I would like to ask you is that somewhere when I was reading through this stuff, because like you, I'm not a speed reader, but I have to flip through things to get to take an overview of everything. Somewhere in my reading over the last 24 hours, I saw that somebody said that once this 4 stages to freedom kicks in, is that it's irreversible, that we can't go back on it. Now, does that mean that if come 8th of March, they take a look and they say, we couldn't possibly manage to fulfill all these obligations, is that they're going to delay the start of it?
That's a very good point, Keith. I mean, governments have to react how the population feel. And as I say, I wouldn't like to be in Boris's shoes or certainly Joe Biden's shoes. But there must be an element of the people have to be at least knowing where they're going, at least happy. You can make people happy if you said you don't have to be too optimistic, but say, look, we think in the region of, say, September, October, it should be stabilised, and we're looking forward to that, etc. The lockdowns have been. I think it's these breaks, Keith. It's like a football match. If you had as many breaks in how we've handled the viruses in football, you'd get a football would last a day. I've read a lot of stats. People go, I don't go with statistics at all, by the way. You know how I feel. I might be considered a maverick there, but I see the statistics. And anyone, as I say, the famous saying, which I think if the viewers haven't heard it, you stick 12 economists or 12 bankers in a room, each one will have a totally different view. And that's society, which is healthy. So I just don't like, I think there's a nanny state element, Keith. I really do. And you've had COVID, I've had COVID. Get on with it. That's my view. Just get on with it. I'm sure when Spanish flu broke, everyone was petrified, but they knuckled down. And that's what I call a massive epidemic. But look, everyone at the NHS have been brilliant, but even they don't know what the future holds. So all I'm saying is there's that element where you've got to leave it to us and human nature and the responsibility and duty of each citizen. You look after your own patch. The pub is a classic. I believe that landlords can control social distancing, which releases the police to do more important things. So I don't think the government might be embarking on a very protracted course, which won't please the population. I've got friends who are very, very wealthy, etc., or in very professional, are thinking this is dragging on too long. I don't know. I welcome your view, Keith. If it goes on to the end of the year, it will be a bit. Well,
the nice thing is that when you and I are together, is you're the logic and I'm the emotion. So my view has to be taken in that context. But just before we go on to that, is what was the other famous phrase? Is there are lies, damn lies, and statistics?
Mark Twain. And he's right. I mean, as you know, I've worked in a city where you've got algorithms and all of this. Actually, all we do in finance and life is we have a load of bricks. Actually, if you factor it down, it's quite simple, really. All we do in modern society is to add lots of layers of bureaucracy, lots of layers of unnecessary additions. When actually, if you go back to I remember a accountant friend of mine said when he had a difficult piece of work to do, he went back to when he was a student, went back to the basics. And I think we've got to do the same with society, Keith.
Yeah, I think we also have got to do that. Yes, with I mean, my feeling about bankers, for instance, not bankers as such, since I'm talking to a former banker. I hate to say it, but I prefer it when the copper comes out. But yes, I mean, I do think that to some extent is society can't start all over again. We can't just wipe everything clean, obviously, but I think there's a lot of rethinking. And if we don't do it at this stage, then we're missing an opportunity because there are lots of inequities and inequalities that have surfaced. And if we allow those to go, society is now far more aware of those things. I mean, you've only got to read social media, and I'm very careful about what I take from social media, but you do get a feel, and people are really quite upset at the fact that the moment we get into this sort of situation is we break into two. There are those that can do anything they want, and there are those people who have to follow the rules. And society can't be like that. The rules have got to be for everybody, and if they're not, then forget the rule.
Yeah, well, that's another element you can say. Again, I think every government has done the best they can, but having lived in Australia, as you know, I do believe that they should have the fines and imprisonment should have come in. As I say, Australia have were the first to actually, I believe, the first months ago to arrest somebody who flouted the law. He got 6 months in jail and $10,000 fine, and all Australians applaud that. We have an element that don't give a damn if they were living in Russia, in Mongolia, they'd be acting the fool and risking people's lives. So how do you sort that out? You set it by example. Now, the government have been, what's a regulation? What's the law? They haven't really precisely defined it. And if you go to the streets, which I do a lot, Keith, you'll find the public are confused about the social distancing. I think social distancing has got it's a good ambition, but it doesn't work in real life. But you have to let the populace and the voters make their own decisions, obviously within the law. But I think that what they've done is they've mismanaged when they use regulation and when they use force of the law. Hence the university thing. Yes, you can't. The police can't arrest 700 university students who go amok. But actually, yes, you can. And if you make an example, have a guess what? The rest of the country might look up. But there's always going to be idiots in every country, in every society, Keith. But I do think they've got it wrong in a number of bigger. Closing the borders is the obvious one, which we all reacted to. So I look at Australia as a bit of an example, and Canada, because they're tough. And you've got to be tough on these idiots because they're risking people's lives. So that's me.
I'm going to come back to Canada in a moment because, as you know, I lived there for 17 years. I have a very, very soft spot for it, but it looks as if Trudeau is going a bit screwball. Mind you, his father was as well, because I was there under his father. But I'd like to chat to you about that. But before that, one of the things when you're talking about rules and regulations is I think that going through our famous phrases is rules are for the observance of fools and the guidance of wise men. And what I think has come out is, and you're saying, is that unfortunately the government in setting rules haven't used them as guidance. They've used them for observance. And that's where somebody being fined £10,000 for organising a snowball fight has got to look ridiculous. And how on earth can we get ourselves into that situation? So yes, I totally go along with that. But now just let me ask you to put on your crystal ball, or look into your crystal ball. The news this morning is that the holiday industry, the travel industry, is beginning to pick up because people can see an end to lockdown. Would you at this stage risk your money on a holiday, booking a holiday?
Yes, I would, but it will take a long time, Keith. I haven't got that money available at the moment. I'll shoot off to Australia tomorrow or today if you told me to. And as you know, I want to get back there, and it's going to be a long time. Would I risk my money? I probably would. I'd like to look at what the conditions of travel are with the airline, but that's essential. The two things that are essential in my life is hospitality and air travel should both come back. It's really how long it takes to get there, Keith. I don't know what the airlines are saying. Have they said? I haven't followed that one too closely, but have they said that they can, if all goes well, they could be flying after summer, later this year? Have they given a time span, Keith?
I think that the holidays are supposed to come back in June. They're taking bookings for June. I mean, it will be very interesting to do an analysis of Gatwick. I mean,
Mm.
I worked or consulted with British Airways for almost 10 years, and on the communication side, PR side, and running an airline, even a small one, is a very complex operation.
Yeah.
And for now suddenly to say, hey, it's June, we may well say that's a long time away, but the people at airports and in airlines and so on are probably saying, oh my God, could we get ready in time, even with a skeleton service? So it's going to be interesting to see the expectation as opposed to the reality. And that's really what your message is be careful, be cautious. Yeah. All right, Paul, we'll come back to you in a minute. Let's just remind people about one or two things. And there are two things that we can expect in April. One is the barbers will be open again. I cannot control. I mean, last time, if you remember, why should you remember? Why should anybody remember? But I grew a beard during lockdown. And this time I started to, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that because my hair gets unruly and so on and so forth. But Andrew, who is my, I think his operation is called Hair for Men, and he really looks after me extremely well. The moment that it's time for me to have my hair cut, he's on the phone or sends me a text message and so on and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to that because it's the one thing that I can't do myself. So I have to look like a shaggy dog. But the other thing is that we should be expecting the. So that's our church bells ringing. The shops may be open in.
Keith, I wanted to ask you a quick question. The obvious question: which hair are you having cut?
There's one that starts somewhere there and goes right down. I would plait it, but there's not another one to plait it with. Now, I have clung, Paul, I started to go bald when I was about 40, just to thin on top, and then progressively. And I've clung to the fact that they say that bald men are sexier than the rest, right? Yes. So you're sitting there with a head of hair, and handsome though you are, is my bald head, ugly though I am, makes me sexier. So how's that for a challenge?
Let's hope there's some more short-sighted women in Lewis.
I can't wait to get you back into the pub, my boy.
Same here. It's funny, Keith, interesting for the viewers' consumption. Interesting, you keep in touch with a lot of people, so do I. And the general theme is hospitality, 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 because we can't. You think after Spanish flu, you think of the World War I and Spanish flu killed certainly 50, 60, they say between 50 and 100 million people. Well, they got off their backsides. It was a new era for the whole society, but they managed to get over that in a number of years, Keith. So this is minimalist to that. And so my mantra has been yes, there will be a change in society. The change is down to us. But let's not jettison what's been good in the past, keep the good values and build upon the modern online theory. I think if we rush it, and I guess after World War One, they had to rush it to rebuild Europe. They probably lost a lot of things that were good. We've got to not make that mistake. That's my concern. A brave new world, as Orwell said. Can we make it that? Well, with some of the idiots that we see in our society, it's going to be hard. But we've got to go forward together. I mean, it sounds like I'm doing a hymn in a minute, but I do think, to be fair, 90% of people I know, and that's not just friends, and like you, I talk to a lot of people and abroad, is that they want to get back to maybe they want to get back to work, they want to get back to the hospitality, which is human nature, and they want to make a difference. And I do think many people who have been frustrated, once they're sometimes better for going through this experience, Keith. I think I've become a better person, more caring, and a lot more together because of what we've been through. So I think it sounds awful. Out of every disease and virus, there comes some good. There must do.
Well, one of the things that I particularly, because I've had to deal with it, and I've been terribly frustrated, is by our form of governance. It hasn't done too badly in terms of the vaccine. It hasn't done too badly in splashing the cash. But when it comes to actually administering some of these things and understanding what life is all about for the average man, it's failed abysmally. And I am very fond of quoting, and most people have forgotten it, isn't it funny? I suppose it depends on what you're interested in. But just before the last election, Boris, when he was on the hustings, said, our form of governance at the moment is not fit for purpose, and that root and branch it should be changed. Now, has he forgotten about that, or is it because he's had his hands full with COVID that nothing has been done? I hope it's the latter. But there is no question that the way that we are governed at the moment. Now, don't misunderstand. I still like seeing processions with the mayor in the cocked hat and the mace being carried and all the pomp and circumstance. That is an important part of the British way of life. Let's face it, do we really want to see a tank outside Buckingham Palace? No, we don't. We want to see horsemen in shiny breastplates and plumes coming out and on horseback. Of course we do, and we don't want to do away with that. That part I think we should keep. But when it comes to the town halls and so on and so forth, I think there's a lot of soul searching that needs to go on. The trouble is that what happens is that if we successfully get through this, everybody will be triumphalist and say how wonderful, and they'll have forgotten about those things which at the time we thought we must do something about. And that's the thing that worries me, Paul, is that we'll go back to the status quo.
You've summed up it all. Lions led by donkeys comes to mind, Keith. That great phrase. The NHS. As you know, I had 4 operations, a life-threatening operation, and the NHS is perfect. It's the bureaucracy of anything. And I think what's stifling modern society, especially Britain and America, is unnecessary bureaucracy, subterfuge bureaucracy, and incompetence. And I think too much money is going to the wrong people. You know my feeling of major corporates. A major corporate can these days almost become the size of a country. Well, that can't be healthy for anybody, with all due respect. Governance is about fiscal propriety. It's about being fair. I don't think my own view is the FCA, which is my professional body, Financial Conduct Authority, toothless tiger. They always have been, and I've said that in publishing. It's a toothless tiger. You've got to crack down on these people, Keith. And what I like about America, where the viewers would have seen it on TV, is that when an errant banker or errant financier does commit a crime, they go to jail for life. Now, I'm not saying we do that, but I think what's happened is the establishment has to some extent covered for these people. And I think that you can't expect the common man or the average person in the street to be prudent, and when he sees his so-called betters being crooks, and there are too many crooks in our society, Keith. Yeah. I think you'd agree with that. And again, that's me as a banker and a policeman talking, but you know the cases, the public know the cases. If the public, most people are decent, Keith. If they see someone like a Fred Goodwin or someone like I'm trying to think of the guy who a Saudi Arabian guy. I can't think of his name at the moment. But if they see people like that, no, sorry, Polypec, yeah, because I met him, and what a slippery guy that was. So the point is, Keith, surely, as the Romans always said, you've got to set an example to the police, to the population. So I just think it's the bureaucracy, and it's a very trouble. Is somebody said, I've got friends in Holland who said, but he said this about this great comment from a European person. Well, Paul, we respect. Britain's got great virtues, great. It's done good things for the world, etc. I said, yes, but what you don't see is a very subtle corruption. I've got American friends who say, but you're not corrupt. Oh, really? It's just that we do corruption and bureaucracy in a different way.
Yeah. Killing them softly.
And that you hit upon it, Keith. NHS, I think most of the population have done well. The people, NHS are fantastic, but it's the people who are getting overpaid for doing a minimal amount of work, and the bloodsuckers, I call them, and that's what we've got to face. Yeah, I think you and I have talked about this, and there's got to be a lot more probity in the system. And
one of the things that one of the little stories that came out when I was doing an interview with a bunch of youngsters in New York the other day, and they asked me about one of the stories that had intrigued me. Even when I was at Reuters, we did a story. As you know, I spent a lot of time in Vancouver, so I got to know the Vancouver Stock Exchange very well, which is one of the most unregulated exchanges in the world. And it came to light that I think it was some northern council had invested money in a diamond mine on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, and that when the investigation started, it turned out that this was a betting company which had just bought a few bobs worth of shares in a diamond mine, and the local council had put money in because they thought they were buying into a diamond mine. And I said they didn't get diamonds; they just got a bunch of pillows. But it's that sort of unregulated stuff, I suppose, that we've got to be very careful about, because after all, if you've got responsibility for people's money, there have got to be some rules and regulations to make sure that you deal with it fairly, and that you're not actually just running away with this and having a jolly good time, which some people have been guilty of course, in the past.
But as you said it, Keith, that over the years, whether it's be the FSA in my profession, I'm sure they do try and do a good job. But the FSA and that, it's all known throughout me and my colleagues, is the toothless tiger. A toothless tiger sums it up. You've got to have. This is why I like Australia and why I like Canada, and Australia's probably a bit tougher than most, is that if a financier in Australia does what financiers do here, they're in jail straight away. It's that tough, Keith. And you've got to do that. Of course, there's corruption in Australia, but at least they show to the people, look, they're not going to get away with it. I could name 100 people over our little chat here that people have seen getting away with it, and that can't be right, Keith. And as you say, this just to give a rough example, my niece, who's must be 38, 39 now, excellent senior nurse. Been 16 years there. Her salary is about £16,000 a year. 16,000. The salary of the guy who was at Royal Sussex was about 420,000. Now, excuse me, Keith, as I fight as in a commercial world where there's ridiculous sums, but again, the likes of Branson have probably earned their money in many ways. You can't knock. Everyone should applaud a reasonable millionaire, but the thing is, we're paying average anonymous people this money, and no one does it. What is the government doing? Where's the regulation? None. So it's my policeman coming out there that you should enforce regulations, which the government haven't done, and the banker financier is that we've got to root out this corruption. That's at the.
I mean, one of the things that does seem to be, well, it is going to be subject to a lot of examination, I think, is the sporting world, where some young man of 20 is earning £50,000 a week or even more, and for kicking a ball around, as they would say. Now, those people who are soccer fanatics and so on, so they defend that to the death. But there is well, I do understand market forces, but actually these aren't market forces. It's a bubble, and what I want to know is what happens when that bubble bursts. Are we suddenly not going to have? Are the stadia going to stand empty, as indeed they are now? Are the leagues, which are so precious, going to disappear? Are these young people who are expecting and anticipating that if they can play football or some other sport well, that they're going to make multi-millions, and suddenly it's not going to be there? And not least of which is, Paul, and I issue a warning to anybody who's watching, is most of this is supported by television revenue. And the television industry is going into a great deal of change. And I look at the stats, what people are watching very frequently, because we try to figure out what it is that we should be putting onto Mirador, particularly when we reorganize next month. And sports is beginning to take a very much a back seat. Game shows and so on are getting sort of 30% of the viewership, and sports is 12%. Now, that if I was in the middle of this entire bundle, I would start to say, hang on, there are some warning signs here. Everybody, well, if you go to an accountant, he says, well, look at where you're going to be in 5 years' time. And I would say to the sporting community, look at where you're going to be in 5 years' time. Perhaps I'm totally wrong. It doesn't matter. But I just see a few warning signs starting there.
You're right and wrong, Keith. I mean, I've looked at this, obviously. Okay. No, the viewing figures, throughout the world, the viewing figures are highest for sport, Keith. They really are. Certainly football. You've got COVID at the moment to affect it, but you could say, take Brighton, my local club. They could get another 20,000 if because it's their local club. What's ruining it is the money. You're absolutely right. And these so-called, I've actually seen the fit and proper rules of the FA. It's a 2-page document where you and I could probably take over a club tomorrow, Keith. And it turns out that we haven't got the money. That's what worries me. But surely football and people's behaviour reflects the society they're in and reflects the government. If the government let these clubs, at the end of the day, they're saying, "Oh, it's down to the clubs." Well, 3 or 4 clubs have gone bust already. It's ridiculous. It's fraud, Keith. Let's call it for its proper name. It's fraud. When you get these overseas owners who produce these bonus. The thing is, it's the greed of the authorities. It's the greed of let's get more money in. Because let's face it, football is the world's game. There's no doubt about that. I've seen football played in about 30 countries. I remember Man United went over to Thailand when I was in there. They got 120,000 people watching them. But what's happening is now, because they're introducing these corrupt people and people who want to turn it into a cheerleaders thing, it's killing itself slowly. You're right. I think we've gone past the tipping point. The money. One of the Brighton players has had about a year and a half. Great player, about 20. They're bidding 60 million for him. He's only played about 30 games. Keith, it's ridiculous. And of course, we know what will happen. It'll all end in tears. And I love the game But the fans know about this, Keith. But they can't. The thing is that they're caught by the short and curlies because
yeah. Let me give you a pub trivia quiz question. But based on I mean, as you know, I've kicked around. If anything, anybody's been a journalistic gypsy, it's me. I've been there, done that, and I did at one particular stage of my career cover the early North American Professional Soccer League. And I covered a game in actually it was in Oakland, but between the San Francisco Golden Gales and the Vancouver Royals. Yeah. Now, do you know who the manager was of the San Francisco Golden Gales?
I think it was a British manager, wasn't it?
No.
The manager.
But, I mean, we can't keep hanging around. But I will tell you, Puskás. Right?
Oh, Puskás, really? Oh, one of the great
Puskás. Yeah. And who was the manager of the Vancouver Royals?
Pele?
Bobby Robson.
Oh, two fine managers.
You see, we see them in the context of their careers elsewhere in the world. But I mean, Bobby Robson wasn't paid a fortune there, and neither was Puskás. I mean, that league was struggling in its early days, and yet they gave their all. And I actually, I did an hour-long interview with Bobby Robson while he was there, and he was a very genuine and decent bloke. I must say, he was very impressive, and I always thought a good ambassador for football. But I was lucky because in those days, I mean, I interviewed Joe Mercer. And I interviewed Stanley Matthews, some of the old greats, because they were still alive, but B, they were much more accessible than people are now, to at least the little guy. But there you are. That was just a side issue. How are we going? 8-18. I think what we better do is just take a. Why don't we just let's have a look at our dear Jane for 2 minutes, shall we?
Yes, why not? Why not?
Hi, I'm Jane at Mirador Television, and I love to recycle, upcycle, renovate, decorate, paint, and if I can find any old junk, I'm happy to turn it into something else. So in the next few months, I'm going to give you some ideas and show you what I'm up to at home, from turning tins into bins, making garden cushions, and my recent find was a Lloyd Loom ottoman, which has a wonky leg, but I'm going to try and renovate the leg and find some lovely fabrics. So lots going on. This week, I'm just going to show you a couple of old cot bumpers that I found hanging around the house from some time ago. And I thought, well, I don't want to waste the foam. I'll turn them into some seat cushions for the garden bench.
Hey, hopefully that lovely cheeky grin will be back. I noticed that you popped out for a glass of champagne there, which is a bit naughty because I had to stay at the controls. So I hope that you've left enough so that when we go off the air in 10 minutes' time, there's enough for me, Paul. Let's just shall we just take a look at the 4 stages. March the 8th. All school pupils to go back in England. We can meet one another, one other person socially in the park for a picnic. Now, you know, the one thing about Lewis is we've got some really lovely parks. So if it's a question of, at the moment, we don't do it. But if the weather starts to get better, we can take a little picnic basket down with a glass of champagne and a few grapes. And the law says that you and I can sit there and quaff champagne and eat the grapes and have a meeting. That's great. I like that. Care home residents can see one visitor, which I think is quite important because they're really where families have suffered badly. And rule of 6 from the 29th of March, where we will be able to sit outdoors in either private gardens or I think that we will be able to go to sports in groups of 6. So that is quite an easing in the, well, I mean, March starts next week, doesn't it?
April the 12th, all shops, gyms, hairdressers, libraries and swimming pools can open. Pub, beer gardens and restaurants reopen for outdoor seated service only. So let us pray. I mean, now I know you're not much of a churchgoer, Paul, but I might just haul you in. It doesn't mention here when churches can open again, but presumably when the shops do. I'm going to haul you into church so that you can pray for a decent spring. Because if we don't have a decent spring, there's no point in being able to sit outside the pub.
Keith, I was a choir boy many years ago, and I sang soprano at Bishop Hannington Church. So I was a bit of I go to church, but it's just that I have such a, well, with a boss like you, making me slave away, I don't get much time for church.
Well, I must confess is that I haven't been, well, the churches simply haven't been open. On the odd occasion that I've been out, but then again, you have to be careful at the moment, because if you venture outside, you've got to have a good reason to do so. I actually went up the other day and I filmed Stephen Catlin on a sad story. There, he looks after a garden up near the Black Horse, and the county council took it over. And immediately let it go to rack and ruin. And then when Stephen said, "Well, look, if you'll pay for the plants, I'll take it back again," and the next thing they did is they said, "Yes, well, that'll cost you £300 for the license to do that." I mean, that's the sort of regulation that's got to just change. I mean, it's just a nonsense, absolute rubbish. But anyway, that was my first time that I really walked up the town, as it were. Zoos and theme parks can open, and university students should be told when they can actually start to go back to their universities. So that's another contentious issue that will be resolved. As I say, I've just got this question mark about the 4 steps, because it did say somewhere that once it's started, it's irreversible. And my guess is that, cautious as they've demonstrated, that our leaders may well be sitting down and saying, "Oh God, have we gone too far by saying it's irreversible?" And put off the start.
That's interesting. I did that 29th, because what it is I would have thought the way they've been acting on a conservative basis and a very logical basis, that means that we'll all be socializing before the second vaccine. Now, that's interesting, because I think many people thought that after the first vaccine, you've got within 12 weeks, get the second, and hopefully that, right. Within that 12 weeks, I would have thought they've locked down. So actually, they've surprised me by doing something that is sensible, and it might sound a bit, it's only radical because of all its the previous things that have been done on a conservative basis. So I think that's a good thing. That social distancing was the one thing that I guarantee 99% of my friends and people I come across, and bus conductors, whatever, whoever you see, they all say it's the social distancing. A, we don't totally understand it, and B, it can't be right. And thank God they've relaxed it.
Yeah. Well, Paul, let me set you a project for when you come back on Thursday. And that is to give us an absolute rundown on the vaccine, because I know you're very, very interested in it. But I think I read something yesterday is that they're finding now that just the one shot is 75% effective, not only in preventing catching it, but also in sort of fighting it off. If that's the case, my guess is that that's affecting thinking. Is people have had one jab. I'm not saying that they won't give us a second. They've had one jab, and we're doing pretty well in protecting them against things. And that will alter sort of the timetable. But perhaps you'll come back on Thursday and give us chapter and verse about where we stand with the vaccine, what it's doing, how it's panning out.
I think I hate to be ahead of the game, but when I made a comment 3 or 4 programs ago, the government have done exactly what I wanted them to do, because initially, if you remember, Boris wanted 3 weeks of second vaccine, which did make sense. But what he's done is good, because the vaccine is within 12 weeks. that gives them some, and they've got to have some flexibility for that, fine. But what they've done is allow people to actually get a breath of fresh air, to see friends with no time limit, etc. And, let's trust the public to act properly. They generally will. I think that's the best decision they've made since they locked down in March last year, Keith. That's a clear decision, and it's a good one. And that's what they perhaps should have done a bit earlier. That's my only fear and my only feeling. It's a
right.
Good
Now, Paul, you and I are going to have a chat afterwards, so I don't want you to disappear. But it's now 8:26, 4 minutes before we end the program. So let us just say what's happening with Mirador. It will be a bit of a scattered production. We are going on the air whenever we can. We don't have any staff in at the moment. Paul and I are trying to hold the fort together until we can get going, which hopefully will be next week. I had an email through, which I just found this morning, from the local government to say that the grants for which we're anticipating benefiting, it will be unfortunately March before they kick in, but at least there is some light at the end of the tunnel. We can actually start to think in terms of putting ourselves back together properly. The market is obviously opening up, so we hope that starting in March that we can slowly put together. And we were at the top of our game at the beginning of this. We were 15,000 people. I say locally. What I mean by that is this program, and that's throughout the country. But 3,000 people on our satellite system or our streaming system around the world, and those figures were growing rapidly. I got the figures in a couple of days ago. Yeah, they've taken a bit of a plunge. Well, not a plunge, but they've eased off. So one could expect that. But we are still in a position to be able to grow back and provide a quality program. If you'll just live with us up until Friday, is next Monday when Paul comes back on, he'll be all scrub-faced and ready to steer us through to a golden future. But we do appreciate you staying with us. And hang on a minute, Paul. I thought that there was a comment there. It looked as if there was somebody who gave us a thumbs up. But Liviu Murasan. Wow. Well, there's a.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's a.
Is that?
Yes, there's a little thing at the top that a Facebook like, and it was that a name I don't recognise. So we picked up somebody somewhere, and that's great. Yeah. So anyway, it's 29 minutes past. So thank you for coming on. We will endeavour to keep ourselves going. Let's see if we can get rid of that, shall we? We should be able to. No, never mind. We'll do it. We'll do it after we go off the air because we're about to do that now. 8:29. It's 8:29 on the today. I think is the 22nd. Paul, is that right? The 22nd of February. Where has the month gone, as usual?
Isn't it 23rd? 23rd, I think.
It's the 23rd. You're quite right. I'm living in the past.
No. Which year? Which year?
No. Let's not start guessing at that.
I'm going to call it the year of the COVID.
Right. Well, year of the COVID. Here, this is who we are. Paul, thanks for being with us. And we'll. I think that we've covered a lot of ground this morning. Yep. The hour has gone very quickly. But those people who say, "Where is Lewis? What is Lewis? What is Mirador?" Here's a little taster.
Well, there we are. I'm not quite sure why we're there, but
Right.
that's because he moved away. Okay,
It's all right. Are we
Toodle
live?
pip. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you on Thursday, Paul.
Okay, Keith. Cheers.